All right. Good afternoon and welcome to you all. As soon as we're done, we will hear from our guest, Richard Kozel-Wright, the director of UNCTAD's Globalization and Development Strategies Division. He'll present UNCTAD's Trade and Development Report 2021. I'll start off with a few humanitarian updates. First one on Afghanistan. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that we, along with our partners, continue to deliver aid to millions of people in need. Yesterday, the International Organization for Migration and UNHCR resumed the distribution of relief items to internally displaced people in Jalalabad who had fled conflict in Kunar Province. Plans are also in place for the distribution of relief items for 5,900 people displaced by conflict. Also yesterday, non-governmental organizations provided urgently needed fuel to Gore Hospital in the west of the country, with more support planned by the United Nations. In the south, some 98,000 people who were displaced by conflict reportedly returned to their areas of origin since the Taliban took control of Lashkargah city in Helmand province. According to provincial authorities, about 84,000 people who returned to their homes are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance, particularly food and shelter. Nearly 635,000 people have been displaced by conflict in Afghanistan this year alone. In addition, some 5.5 million people remain in protracted displacement since 2012. Turning to Ethiopia, our colleagues are telling us that the spillover of the conflict in Tigray into Amhara and Afar provinces continue to dramatically increase humanitarian needs. More than 1.7 million people in both regions are reportedly food insecure. According to regional authorities, more than 140,000 people were displaced in Afar, and more than 233,000 people were recently displaced in Dessie and Kombolcha in Amhara. Despite access constraints to some areas in both regions due to the ongoing hostilities and lack of funds, we, along with our partners, continue to scale up the response and support the authorities-led response efforts in both regions. Our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that between 5 and 7 September, 147 trucks of humanitarian assistance arrived in Tigray from Afar. Before that, no trucks had been able to get into Tigray since August 22nd. And as a reminder, that while this development is very much welcome, 100 trucks with food and non-food items and fuel must enter Tigray every single day to meet the scale of the needs on the ground. In another welcome development, the first of the European Union's humanitarian air bridge flights arrived in Tigray on September 11th, carrying 7 metric tons of nutritional supplies. The UN's humanitarian air service passenger flights in and out of Tigray continue to operate 2 flights per week as planned, with 12 flights having operated since July. And today, the UN mission in the Central African Republic announced a decision by the Secretariat to repatriate all Gabonese military units from the Central African Republic, effective immediately. This decision follows credible reports received by the mission of sexual abuse by the Gabonese military contingent deployed to the peacekeeping mission and the history of pending allegations involving Gabonese contingents in the country. Gabon has been formally notified of this decision. The mission also dispatched an immediate response team to the location to assess the situation, establish prevention measures, and raise awareness among communities on how to report sexual exploitation and abuse. The mission has referred the victims to humanitarian partners for medical, psychosocial, and protection assistance in line with our policies on support of victims to sexual exploitation and abuse. Moving on to Somalia, I can tell you that we strongly condemn the deadly terrorist attack that took place in Mogadishu yesterday. We extend our deep condolences to the families of the victims and wish a swift recovery to those injured. We will continue to stand with the people and the government of Somalia in their efforts against terrorism and violent extremism to strengthen peace and security in the country. Back here this morning, the Secretary General spoke in person to the board of, spoke virtually but live to the board of the UN Global Compact. He said that public and private actors must come together to drive a sustainable recovery to the pandemic, to tackle climate change. He stressed that we must make a just transition to a net zero carbon world leaving no one behind, and added that private finance for climate investments must increase significantly. He told members of the board that they can lead by transforming their own operations and industries, by shaping consumption, and by using their influence to promote green government action. The Secretary General noted that investing in inclusive, sustainable economies could yield a direct economic gain of $26 trillion through 2030, and that transitioning to a circular economy that reduces, reuses, and recycles materials could create 6 million jobs over the same time horizon. Full remarks have been shared with you. And the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, met this morning with the chiefs of all UN entities working on sustainable development to review progress made in the last year against sustainable development priorities on the COVID-19 recovery. The UN Sustainable Development Group agreed to continue the UN reform implementation to meet the demands of the 2030 Agenda. For the first time, the group endorsed an accountability framework that brings together the UN system at all levels towards SDG implementation. This centered around the strengthened leadership of resident coordinators in line with reforms of the UN development system. The group also discussed the way forward in advancing our Common Agenda report, which the Secretary General launched on Friday. And the Security Council held an open meeting on South Sudan. Briefing Council's members virtually was Nicholas Haysom, the Secretary General's Special Representative in South Sudan. He said that on September 12th, South Sudan marked the 3-year anniversary of the revitalized peace agreement, and noted there have been some positive developments registered in recent months, including the inauguration of the reconstituted parliament and the appointments of women to senior positions. Mr. Haysom noted that the significant challenges of the peace process remain, including the establishment of impartial, unified security institutions, especially for the electoral process. He also expressed concern over the increasingly restrictive civic space. And the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Martin Griffiths, will be briefing the Security Council on Syria this afternoon, following his visit to the region at the end of last month. He's expected to brief on the increasing needs facing Syrians after 10 years of conflict, recent developments in getting access to people in need, following the Security Council's adoption of Resolution 2585 in July, and the need for adequate...
Anyway, I'll call him.
Okay. Somebody's mic is open, and this could become interesting. All right. Too bad. Mr. Griffith's full remarks will be available to you. And Covax... It's okay. This is what happens when you do, improv theater. A Covax update for you today from Sri Lanka. The UN team led by the resident coroner, Hana Singer Hamdi, has been working with authorities as well as national and international partners to tackle the pandemic, including through an accelerated vaccination drive. More than 3.3 million doses of vaccines have arrived through Covax. So far, 60% of the population has received at least one dose, with nearly 50% having received 2 doses. We've also provided technical expertise and provided medical machinery, test kits, personal protection equipment, beds for intensive care units. The UN is supporting distance learning for some 700,000 children, supporting more than 350,000 workers, and addressing food security for 200,000 people. And today is the International Day of Democracy, which is a good thing. In his message, the Secretary General stressed that as the world struggles to emerge from the pandemic and its devastating consequences, we must learn from the lessons of the past 18 months to strengthen the democratic resilience in the face of future crises. He pointed out that strengthening democracy also means embracing genuine participation in decision-making, including peaceful protests, giving a real voice to people and communities that have traditionally been excluded, and emphasize that democracy simply cannot survive, let alone flourish, with the absence of civic space. Tomorrow, I want to flag that Friday, September 17th at 10 a.m., the virtual International Day of Peace Youth Observance will take place under the theme Recovering Better for an Equitable, Sustainable World. Participants include the Secretary General, Messengers of Peace Midori, Paulo Coelho, Jane Goodall, as well as students from 20 countries. It's been organized by DGC, and will be streamed on Web TV, YouTube, and the UN Twitter account. Tomorrow, our guest will be the resident coordinator, humanitarian coordinator for Haiti, Bruno Lemarquis, and the IOM's chief of mission in Haiti, Giuseppe Loprete. They will brief you on the They will brief us virtually on Haiti and the situation as we mark the 1 month anniversary of the earthquake. We have now 128 member states that have been paid in full. We thank our friends in a country that have 2 capitals, an executive and a legislative one, and that recently changed its name. Yes, Eswatini. Yeah, Eswatini. Exactly. So we thank our friends in Eswatini, and we give the floor to today's winner, Michelle Nichols.
Thank you, Stéphane. 2 questions for you. First one, does the Secretary General have any response to the firing of ballistic missiles by North Korea overnight?
Right, and the second question?
Well, if you answer that, and then I'll go for the second.
Oh, all right, we can be that way. We're very much aware of the media reports and are concerned by the latest developments that we've seen. As we've said before, diplomatic engagement remains the only pathway to sustainable peace and complete verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Thank you. And then second question, our colleague Lenka has tweeted a letter from New York City to the UN PGA. I'm not sure if the SG received this letter as well, but it notes that New York City requirements mean that everyone in the GA hall has to be vaccinated. What's the UN kind of response to that? Will you be checking vaccination cards on the way in next week?
So we've just seen the letter sent out by the President of the General Assembly. We will, of course, work with the President's office and member states on how to implement whatever decisions are taken by the member states that regard delegates. For the part of the Secretariat, as we've said, all staff members that are public-facing, diplomat-facing, journalist-facing are required to be vaccinated. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Further on the repatriation of the peacekeepers, can you give us some more details on exactly how many have they gone yet, who's going to replace them, and any more details on the allegations and the scope of the allegations?
Yeah, I mean, the Gabonese contingent is about 450 personnel, and it's Gabon's only peacekeeping deployment. We are working with the host government and obviously contingents that are already in country to pick up, to fill the void that will be left by the Gabonese in the immediate, and of course to figure out who will replace them in the long term. The decision taken by the Secretary General comes after what we feel is demonstrated failure to respond effectively to a history of allegations and sexual exploitations in the Central African Republic by the Gabonese, which include a failure to conduct timely and effective investigations and to report on sanctions for substantiated allegations. The history of these allegations go back to 2015 of misconduct, right? For not on these particular allegations, but the going back to the misconduct of Gabon since 2015. With new allegations, we've received a total of 32 allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse concerning 81 alleged perpetrators from Gabon, all military contingent members deployed or formerly deployed in MINUSCA. Of these 32 allegations, 6 have been substantiated through an investigation, according to the information we've received to date. The allegations vary, but they are all violations of the rules and policies in place, put in place by the UN. Ms. Salome.
Just to clarify then, so there were new allegations?
Yes, there were new allegations.
And are those part of the 6 substantiated and a total of 32?
No, so, no, since 2015, we received 32, since 2015, it's 32 in total. I don't have the exact numbers of specific for this case, but I think it's important to put this in context. There was a resolution passed in 2016 by the Security Council, which basically gave the Secretary General the authority that if there was evidence of credible, widespread, and systemic sexual exploitation, abuse, or failure to take action on these allegations or to hold perpetrators accountable, the whole units could be replaced under the authority of the Secretary General. Ibtisam.
Thank you, Steph. As probably you saw, the Security Council renewed the mandate of the UN mission in Libya until the end of the month only for further negotiation. Do you have first any comments on that?
No, I mean, we serve at the pleasure and with the mandate of the Security Council, so we look forward, obviously, to the continuing discussions.
And what does the Secretary General would like to see in the renewal of the mandate? I mean, he has his report, he has recommendations. Is there specific things from his report or recommendation that
well,
he
thinks all of the recommendations that he's put forward are important, right? Ultimately, the Security Council will decide what they feel the UN should do on the ground. We've been accompanying the Libyan people in this process now for quite some time, and we look forward to continuing doing so. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I want to follow up with a question Ibtisam asked you a few days ago about the status of the Palestinian 4 prisoners who managed to escape, but they were recaptured. The lawyer of the prisoners, Khalid Mahajna, met one of them, and he gave a strong statement to the press about how much suffering they went through after they were captured. One of them kept completely naked for 7 hours. They were denied food. They were denied sleeping. And Zakaria Zubaydi was beaten by a number of security people, and the beating shows on his face. So the statement of their lawyer, did it reach the ears of Mr. Winslow?
Our principal position is that no prisoners anywhere should suffer inhumane treatment. We are following this particular situation closely of those people who were rearrested through their interlocutors on the ground who have access to the prisoners. When I have more, I will share it with you. Iftikhar and then Ali. Iftikhar?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask, since the situation in Afghanistan appears to be settling down, does SRG, Ms. Lyons and her staff plan to return to Kabul anytime soon?
Ms. Lyons is back in Kabul.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Thank you.
The numbers, I don't think the overall footprint has not really changed substantially, but she is in Kabul.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ali.
Yes, I have 3 questions.
Sorry, sir.
One is on Michelle.
Hold on, Ali. Ali, hold on. Iftikhar, I think your mic is open. Okay. All right, Ali, let's take them one at a time.
Okay. So first, the vaccination. Did you mean now that no UN personnel is allowed to be headquarters without vaccination.
No.
Just a clarification.
No, that's not what I said. What I said is that all public-facing personnel, right? So all the personnel like myself who interact with journalists, who interact with diplomats, all of them are mandated to be vaccinated in order to come to work. All UN personnel have been asked to report their vaccination status, and I think that reporting is good. So that's my clarification.
Why you're saying it is good based on numbers?
Yeah, I think they're reporting the vaccination rates. I don't have the exact numbers, but they're fairly good.
My follow-up question on this: it is a requirement wherever in New York City and state, if you want to enter anywhere, you have to prove you're vaccinated. I tried last week to enter a restaurant.
No, I know what I live here. I know what the rules are, Ali. What is your question?
So with the question, what is barring the UN from putting this as a requirement? And my other follow-up question on this: do you have any of how many people infected inside the UN or because of the UN?
The numbers of people that have been infected, the number of UN staff that have been infected in New York is fairly low, and as far as I know, there have been no cases of workplace transmission. So the number of staff in New York that have gotten COVID that have been reported to us, right, is 519. But to date, and this is important, there have been no instances that we are aware of workplace transmission. And this, we feel, through the extensive measures that have been put in place.
Thank you. My other question, since you talked about sexual abuse in conflict zones, today there was a hearing at the Congress for sexual abuse against famous gymnasts in the U.S.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about those?
First of all, our heart goes out to all the young women who were abused in this instance. My comment, if you would ask me about sexual abuse anywhere, is that perpetrators have to face justice, and that the fight against sexual abuse is an ongoing one, right? Is one where systems continuously have to be tightened, where the issue of power has to be addressed, of the balance of power, of avoiding situation where there are only men in power, and that's one of the things that the Secretary General has been addressing. Okay.
My last question is about nominating Stéphane de Mistura as the special representative for special personnel envoy for the Secretary General to the Western Sahara. There are reports that Morocco and Polisario have agreed already to it. Is this, can you confirm?
No.
And when is the nomination?
Ali, you know I cannot confirm it. I've seen those reports. I think, as the Secretary General said a number of times, I think we're up to 13 names he's put forward. The process is ongoing. No one more than him or myself would be happy to actually have an announcement here so we can stop fielding questions. Mr. Bays.
Thank you.
Back to the building and the vaccination. So the Secretary General has the power and is using it to stop people going to dining facilities unless they're vaccinated. He's got the power for people like you who are public facing not to be vaccinated. Now he's hearing that the city would like everyone coming to the G8 to be vaccinated, and the President of the General Assembly strongly supports that move. So is it under active consideration to have an overall vaccination mandate for this building? Because there seems to be no reason not to do it.
In terms of the delegates, we will work with the President of the General Assembly. In terms of the staff, we're continuously reviewing our policies and trying to make this building as safe as possible.
And clearly this building would be as safe as possible if there was a vaccination mandate on every single person coming into the building. That would make it safer than it currently is.
That is a statement and not a question, and one that I would not wholly disagree with. Okay.
Quick follow-up.
Michelle.
Sorry.
And if I'm not here tomorrow, you'll know why. Yes.
Are there any plans to have like a vaccination station?
My understanding is that the City of New York has graciously offered to set up a vaccination tent in front of the UN during the General Assembly. So I would very much hope that if any journalists are not yet vaccinated, they would avail themselves of that, and obviously for staff and anyone who wants to use the vaccination station.
That's on campus, or
no? It'll be just outside.
Like on
I believe
First
just on
Avenue
First Avenue. Yeah.
Cheers.
Yes, Edie, and then Abdelhamid.
Steph, can you confirm that the issue of requiring vaccinations for delegates is the issue of diplomatic immunity?
No, it's an issue of who has authority over the delegates. I think we were joking before the start of the meeting about smoking. I think some of us here will remember the tribulations of what happened when the Secretary General at the time, Kofi Annan, tried to impose a non-smoking regulations throughout this building. The point is, this is a member state-led organization. The Secretary General does not have the authority to force delegates into one way or another. Abdelhamid.
Stéphane, I know that the Commissioner General of UNRWA will be here in the building around October 1st. Kindly we request that if we can meet with him in this room.
That sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
Excellent. James, then we'll have to go to our guest.
Yeah, just one more question as a follow-up to what you said about Deborah Lyons. What does the special personal envoy Jean Arnaud, what is he doing? What has he done in recent weeks? What's he up to now?
My understanding is he's continuing his contacts, but I'll try to get you something with a second sentence. Sylviane, and then we will go to our guest.
Thank you, Stéphane. How are you?
Great.
There are, well,
Great. Go ahead.
there is a letter sent by 145 Lebanese and international rights groups, survivors and families of the victim of Beirut port explosion of August 4. They sent a letter, joint letter, asking the member state at the United Nations Human Rights Council to establish an international, independent, and impartial investigative mission, such as a one-year fact-finding mission into the Beirut port explosion of August 4. This letter follows a similar one sent by 115 rights groups, survivor family of the victim. Is there any reaction from the UN?
I think that would be a question for the human. That would be a question for the Human Rights Council. We've always called for justice for the victims of the explosion in Beirut.
But investigation and an official investigation, is it possible to put up?
Again, that would be, it was addressed to the Human Rights Council. That would be have to be their decision. Elena, and I'm sorry, and then we will go to you, Richard. Thank you for your patience.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Thank you for the patience. Yesterday, former Mozambican transport minister, Paulo Zukula, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for corruption. And this at the same time when there's ongoing trial for another minister in Mozambique in the case of the hidden debts. So seeing that many high-level political figures, not only in Mozambique, but around the world, are being investigated and sued and sentenced for corruption, what is the reaction from the UN to these cases? Thank you.
I don't have, let me get some lines for you on that a bit later today, because I don't have any language on that off the top of my head. Okay.